This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. The Weeknd. I haven't covered the musician known as The Weeknd in quite some time, but you may have noticed if you tried to go on YouTube in the last 24 hours that YouTube was trying to cram The Weeknd's live stream concert down everyone's throat because you couldn't turn anywhere on YouTube. You couldn't watch any video without YouTube recommending that you watch his newest live stream taking place in Brazil. And I decided, well, you know what? This thumbnail looks a little bit suspicious. It kind of looks like a gateway because we know that doors represent gateways in a lot of their music videos. When they show you a door, that's what they're representing. Of course, we see the two pillars as well, which also represent gateways in Freemasonry. So I figured, let me take a look at this live stream concert that they want us to see. And oh boy, did it not disappoint. Wait till you get a load of what they were showing in this live stream. And again, if you don't know who The Weeknd is, here's some pictures of The Weeknd doing the all-seeing eye symbolism, Party Monster. Here's another one of his album covers where he only shows one eye. I guess he's embarrassed maybe of his one eye. I mean, never an explanation why they always like to hold a hand up over there. But of course, we know the real reason. The same reason there's only one eye on the back of the dollar bill, because it represents the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. And again, The Weeknd had a specific video which paid homage to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I can't show you any screenshots of because every time I do, I don't just get a strike. I go bye-bye. So Fear and Loathing, of course, in Las Vegas is all about a red liquid that these people are obsessed with. They love to drink it. And guess what? It's not Gatorade. It's something else. So he paid homage to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And again, he's also done the Super Bowl halftime show. I have a bunch of videos on the website exposing The Weeknd. But here is how the show started, right? So you see these druids on the stage, right? You immediately can see, okay, all right, there's something going on. There's some smoke. There's some druids. And then we see a giant door open. You would think it was like the gateway to heaven, right? How it's depicted to us, at least through imagery, right? This door is opening, as white light coming through. It's ominous. And then, you see this giant arch, right? Now, some of you may have seen this arch before. It might be very familiar to you, right? Because we see arches like this in Paris. We see arches like this in New York City. In fact, we even see arches like this where it comes to, well, the Arch of Baal, which they tried to roll out in cities like Washington, D.C. back in 2018, and I covered it then. Well, what does this archway represent? Well, we also see the archway, of course, in Freemasonry, right? There's an obsession with archways. And of course, the concept of the twin pillars with the archway is traced back to ancient civilizations. It's traced back as a gate of sacred places, a portal, so to speak. You may remember in Harry Potter, if you've seen Harry Potter, most of you might not have seen Harry Potter. I actually have never really seen the movies, but I've covered what's in it because I've done deep dives of what's actually in it. And recently I talked about how they're opening a Harry Potter theme park down in Florida. Well, they actually have an entranceway, which is what is known in Harry Potter world as the Veil, right? Because that's what this is really about. With all the stuff we see going on with Cern, they're trying to summon and bring over what's on the other side. They're preparing you for this with all the alien and UFO propaganda. Because if people realize that demons are being summoned, that spirits are being summoned, what would happen? All of these atheists would break free from their spell. All of these people who turned from God would turn back to God because they'd realize that the Bible is real. And they don't want you to realize the Bible is real. They want you to actually accept the demons. So, of course, by calling them aliens, well, and all this love movement stuff, you could see where this is headed once these demons are brought over. And in Harry Potter, that same archway that you see is also depicted as a veil. So back to this arch, right? So this isn't random imagery behind The Weeknd, right? We see the gates open. We see this arch, and what do you think? He's just a huge fan of New York City? Is that what the gimmick is supposed to be? Because suddenly as the arch disappears and what looks like heaven behind him with the clouds disappears, what we see is something on the other side trying to break free. You could clearly see this demonic entity on the other side that they're trying to bring forth. You could see it behind a wall. It's a very common theme that we see in a lot of these music videos with Rihanna, with Madonna. They always have this thing with their hands on a wall, and that represents dimensions. That represents the veil, trying to bring over what's on the other side, right? But after we see this demon on the other side, of course, it only makes sense that it turns into a giant eyeball, right? Because everybody in the concert, of course, is probably somebody who's failed out of optometry school like The Weeknd, because there's just this obsession with eyes, right? Every celebrity holding a hand up over their eye. And how does one correlate what we've seen so far, right? What we would look at as heaven, as we look at as that thing in New York City that nobody knows. Oh, yeah, what is that? That gateway in New York with clouds? It looks like up in the sky. And then, of course, something on the other side trying to come over. And then an eyeball appearing. Of course, this is representing the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, their god that they worship. And then from there, the eye disappears, and we start to see all of this, what looks like almost like black goo, like tentacles, like black goo tentacles all around, right? Maybe that's the DNA that they're mixing with human beings' DNA at the moment, if you believe that narrative or not. It's up to you, but we know there's a transformation going on. The black goo represents a transformation, taking human beings' genetic code and manipulating it and changing it, thus changing what God created. God created all of us uniquely. That's why we all have our own specific DNA. That's something they're trying to alter. And after we see all this goo flying around on the screen, suddenly we see the stage turn into a giant tower. Does that not look like a giant tower? It kind of looks like, well, the Tower of Babel that they're awfully obsessed with. For a bunch of people that don't believe in God, they're certainly obsessed with creating a giant tower. Of course, we just saw this at the Olympics where we had Lucifer himself, because that's what that thing was depicting at the Olympics, standing on top of a tower because they were building a tower. They were talking about the Tower of Babel. We've seen all these buildings from Amazon with the Tower of Babel, Megalopolis, which I just covered, and Metropolis, that video I did on Megalopolis, which is a new film that's coming out from Francis Ford Coppola, also depicting the Tower of Babel. They're obsessed with the Tower of Babel and recreating the Tower of Babel. And shortly after that, we see the flames of hell, right? But of course, we conveniently see the phoenix rising from the ashes, because really that's what this is all about, right? Destroying everything and recreating. The phoenix rising from the ashes. And of course, what then appears on the stage? Well, a bunch of druids, right? There's certainly an obsession that they have with these people wearing these druid cloaks, right? I mean, what are they, just trying to recreate Bohemian Grove? Is that what we're supposed to believe? What are we supposed to believe? Because when we see druids, I mean, we can only interpret it as some type of form of witchcraft and Satanism occurring, because they wear these cloaks during their rituals and they hide who they really are. Because if you found out who they were, well, they would be thrown in jail, because if you found out what they were doing and what they were guilty of, well, jail would be a very kind thing for these people. So as The Weeknd is on stage, he turns around, of course, and we see right on his back a giant pentagram, right? So if you were still questioning whether or not this was a massive satanic ritual, well, think no further. I mean, he's got the pentagram on his back. Is somebody going to pretend like he drew the pentagram? Like, you know how they teach kids in school to draw a star, but they're really drawing a pentagram, and the parents don't even realize what's going on. Like, hey, let's teach them to draw a star. Hey, it's a star. It's like, what's up in the sky? Have kids drawing pentagrams at a young age. Happens in most institutions, aka schools. So he's got a pentagram on his back while he's got his druid cloak on. And then we see this portal, right? So all this stuff that you've seen so far with the demons on the other side, now you can actually see the portal opening, right? They show you a giant portal. It almost looks like that ray coming out from Cern, doesn't it? I mean, it does to me, right? It almost looks like a Hadron Collider. You know, stuff that you've seen in shows like Stranger Things, this obsession with these giant laser beam things that nobody thinks any further of what they're trying to do. They say they're trying to open up a black hole. They're literally trying to lift the veil that God put in place and bring over what's on the other side. So what's interesting to note, what I found to be very suspicious, is that after they show this, they show you what appears to be New York City in smoke. Now, I find this very suspicious because obviously we have a massive ritual occurring here. I mean, it's pretty clear from the images I've shown you. And then we have New York City in smoke. Now, we know New York City is always a target for false flag events and other things. But what's very interesting to know with New York City, and the fact that they left this on the screen for a period of time, is that even recently in New York City, you may remember, they put that giant portal in New York City. Of course, they said, hey, this is just a portal we're putting here where you could go walk up to it and see people in Ireland. And people didn't think anything more than that. And they literally called it a portal, which is a conditioning method that they use. Now, you might say, oh, so you're telling me they're going to put up a portal to the other dimension in the middle of a city. Well, would anything surprise you at this point? If people accept, I mean, was there anything that people won't accept? We already have people, if we're at a point where people are talking about men having babies, and we're at a point where parents are castrating their kids at 3 years old because they pick up a Barbie doll and they're a boy, and then they suddenly decide, the parents decide they're a girl. I mean, if that's what's accepted in society, you don't think that they could tell people that a portal, a time traveling, a dimension put in a city, but they would have pushback for it? Of course they would. Of course they would. They'll still call us conspiracy nuts, right? So we have that, and then of course we pull away. And what is the stage that The Weeknd is performing on? Would anybody out there be surprised to learn that the stage he's standing on is a gigantic X? Of course, this is another common thing we always see with these people. I don't know if they're just big fans of the alphabet. Maybe they think the X looks cool. Well, of course, that's just me joking. The X represents the Antichrist. The X represents the Antichrist. And you could see Madonna wearing the X over the eye patch, depicting the all-seeing eye, of course. And we've seen, in Freemasonry, they have a ritual. They cross their arms over their chest, and you'll see this a lot in Hollywood. I've covered this with Stephen King and all these celebrities doing this over their chest, and people out there don't even realize what's going on. They're just, oh yes, Jerry Seinfeld's making a giant X. Matt Damon's making a giant X. Isn't that weird? Chris Brown, Robin Williams is making a giant X with their arms. Nobody notices these things, right? They worship the coming Antichrist. And you could see all these celebrities doing the X, just like you could see them all doing the all-seeing eye symbolism. So this was a concert that they wanted people to see. They put this out, not only trending. I mean, you didn't have to go in the trending section. It was literally like on the top of YouTube, if you noticed. It was pretty much everywhere. It was being recommended that people watch it. Of course, at first I said, I didn't even blink. I didn't even look. And then I started thinking to myself, wait a minute, look at this thumbnail here. What is this? And of course, when I see the thumbnail and I see the two pillars, which of course are the pillars we see in Freemasonry, and the knowing that in Freemasonry they use the arch as well next to the two pillars, which represents a gateway. A door represents a gateway in these music videos that they do. And this all has to do with what's going on with Cern and what we see going on all the time around us with them talking about aliens and UFOs, this deception that's coming. They are planning on bringing over these demons from the other side. Now, I know that that sounds crazy to most people, and I certainly know it sounds crazy to people who are just waking up. But if you actually pay attention to the imagery and you read the Bible, you'll see that this spiritual war is real and it's actually going on. And these celebrities are constantly using this type of symbolism. This isn't anything new. This isn't artsy by The Weeknd. He's literally recreating. Look, he's literally showing you on stage. Again, let's just recap what we saw so we could all put our brains can formulate this in a row here, right? We had an opening with the gates, what appear to be, the gates and the door to heaven, right? And the arch, which most people are like, well, it's just an archway, right? The archway represents what I was mentioning earlier. And again, don't forget the Arch of Baal, which they were rolling around the cities. The arch in Freemasonry, they talk about it in Freemasonry, that it's a gate of sacred places, right? In Harry Potter, they have that arch, okay? And they talk about in Harry Potter it being a veil. On the other side, of course, you could see these, what we would look at is these shadow figures, which are clearly entities on the other side that are trying to come over. And then they give us the all-seeing eye symbolism. They show us what appears to be black goo tentacles. And then from there, we just get the recreation of the Tower of Babel, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the druids walking around showing us this is a ritual. I mean, you could just see, blatantly obvious it's a ritual. I mean, there's times where you might see a video that I make or someone else makes and be like, well, is it a ritual? I mean, it's a Super Bowl hat. Well, they're literally in druid cloaks, so I don't think it could be much more obvious than that it's a satanic ritual. In fact, he had a pentagram on his back. I mean, what do we associate the pentagram with? We associate it with witchcraft, do we not? I mean, that's the symbol for witchcraft. And the symbol for Satanism is the upside down pentagram, the inverted pentagram, right? And then, of course, they show you the portal opening. It looks exactly like what we've seen in Stranger Things, what we see at Cern, this giant beam opening a door. And why do they show us New York City? Huh? Why do they show us New York City? That's very interesting. They show us New York City in a smoke. It almost reminds me of the smoke that occurred back in the year 2001 when they created a smoke, so to speak, in New York City, when they detonated in New York City. So this all being done, of course, on a gigantic stage in the form of an X. Usually the stage that they use is either an X or a circle. The circle, of course, being their protection circle that we see used in all of their witchcraft rituals. That's what they usually do at the Grammys and some of these other award shows. But it's very clear, very, very clear here that this was nothing more than a mass ritual done by The Weeknd. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.